Hey everyone, AmberFrmThVault here. Welcome back to another $5 or less game, or in this case, more of a visual novel. We've done these before. This one is called Ritual, and there is no home screen. It just goes straight into the game, so we're going to be on this screen for a little bit here. I do want to read you the description of the game, but before I do that, I just want to give you a heads up that it is pretty clear that this is not a native English speaker. Perhaps even it had been translated by maybe like Google Translate or something like that, because the description doesn't make a ton of sense to me, but I did want to go ahead and give it a try because it is listed as being, dark storytelling, and that's something I enjoy. But the game's description says, the ritual is what so many are afraid of. It is not known where it came from, but is it really so? What is his secret? Why people take actions because of him, exhausting themselves and, in the end, dying? Can't no one be able to overcome this attack? So I'm not sure if ritual is a person or if the ritual is a thing. So I'm a little confused by it, but that's all right. We're going to go ahead and jump in. We'll read through the story here. We'll participate in the visual novel, and you guys can tell me in the comments what you think. Of course, this is being under $5. This one is actually under $1. It is normally 99 cents. I did get it for 49 cents. It is often on sale. Just check out Steam. You'll probably find it for 50% off. So we start our visual novel here, and it says author. With all this oppressive atmosphere, a blizzard was raging outside the window, the howl of which was very loud and frightening. Batteries barely warmed up an apartment in a dilapidated emergency house. It seemed that he was about to fall apart like a house of cards, but he still continued to stand. No wonder. Surprisingly simple Soviet technologies made themselves felt. Houses are ugly and disgusting, like an ordinary piece of cinder block, but they could stand for centuries. The batteries themselves were very old, with such special plates instead of the usual pipe. It was they who did not allow to freeze in the apartment, as they were scalding the heat as if they were not in themselves. You can even get burned by touching such a battery. There were eternal problems with food because this city is difficult to access for convoys with food. Everything is like in a besieged Leningrad. Took me a second there, sorry. You have to forgive me, dyslexia. Only people here outside of the war. Only people here died outside of the war, excuse me. But this is an ordinary life in a provincial town called, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce that properly, so we're going to go with Megla, somewhere in the north. This is where the story of our hero begins, which along the way will lead to its end. The room, saturated with dampness, was all dark and gloomy. Therefore, even in the light, I did not want to look at it very much. It was like a place where no one had lived for several years. In fact, one could say so. Sratch? I'm not sure if that's correct. Flowing wallpaper with overgreen moss in the corner and a whole flock of spiders in the other. By the way, spiders were very useful. Pests were always thrown into their web, and I totally get that. And it had been smeared with honey. Much to my surprise, someone did live here. This apartment has never been taken care of. It has not even been cleaned. What can we say about ordinary repairs? No replacement of old wiring, drain pipes, nothing. Everything is like hundreds of years ago. Even the senile smell of that time has long been ingrained in every corner. Real quick, don't kill your spiders. If you have an excessive amount, obviously take care of them, but keep your spiders. This game is right. It's worth it. By the way, about those who lived here, the first family did not stand out in any way for themselves, average resident. They were ordinary Soviet people whose family consisted of one mother and two boys. One was called Arkady, the other was Alexander. The children lost their father from childhood when he learned that he would have twins. His mother did not tell much about him, The only thing they knew was that he was a minor. The happiest time for the brothers was when the sun warmed up the dirty snow and the grass began to grow. Because of the place where they lived, the summer was very short, only 1 month. The two brothers loved to amuse themselves. They took an enamel bucket with them outside and shoved their various insects that could not get out, mostly maggots, worms, and the like. After catching, they came home and played with them as little soldiers. They stopped doing such fishing when they realized that it would be much easier to catch cockroaches at home, and there were enough of them. Oh, cockroaches are the one thing I am deeply afraid of. That and bridges that go over water. But anyway, especially in the bathroom, because it has a window to the street, so there is no nasty, musty smell, no vent was provided. It was through him that cockroaches love to get into a damp bath. In one night, they could eat a third of a bar of soap, run around the whole room, and lie down in the bathtub, since it was always damp due to the leaking tap. Every morning, the two of them ran down to the bathtub and watched at least 5 of them. They all also loved to play with them. The two brothers kept them in a small container and put them in the freezer. They did this so the cockroaches hardened, and then, with them, it was possible to collect imaginary troops. They had no toys, so that explained a lot. It was during these years that their mother began to take great interest in Asian culture. A friend gave her a magazine called Te Na. In recipes, she noted insect dishes for herself. She was overjoyed to learn that their freezer was completely full. She made wonderful food out of these cockroaches. In general, the children could play enough, and the mother, meanwhile, cooked dinner, literally out of nothing. Not life, but a fairy tale. Just FYI, if you have lots of allergies, you probably are allergic to cockroaches. Turns out most people who have chocolate allergies, supposedly, I don't know 100% how true this is, I was told this by an allergist, people who have chocolate allergies are often allergic to cockroaches, and that's what you're actually reacting to. When I was told that by my allergist, I was like, oh boy, I either need to get a new allergist or I need to start crying because I don't want to think about chocolate that way. The time was not the most fun. At some point, there was real tragedy for the brothers. Their mother died from another eaten cockroach. She would not have suspected that she had contracted an infection from the vile pests. Of course, all this did not happen at once, somewhere after a few weeks. The children at the moment were already healthy bulls, so they were able to take their mother to the bath and bury her there. Wait, what? The bath? I guess they cleaned her up first or something? Well, as it were, they threw it, and that's it. The first week they visited just to see if she would come back to life, expecting that the mother was about to get out of the bath and everyone would be happy again. Alas, this did not happen. Oh my God, they just put her in the bathtub and then... Woo! Okay. Scarring, guys. The time came to the end of the week. The brothers saw the absence of eyes in their mother. In their place, like a swarm, sat a bunch of cockroaches that ate her flesh. All the clothes were bitten, and in places where the skin was visible, a huge number of eggs stuck out. Sasha, seeing this, vomited. Arkady reproached him with the fact that this was the acceptance of the new flesh of their mother, that this is such a rebirth. Through pain and agony, she had to go through this thorny path and become the queen of cockroaches. Wait, I thought their names were Arkady and Alexander, but now I'm getting Sasha. Okay, cool. Either way, Sasha refused to listen to Arkady. His mind was shattered by these words. He could not stand it, got out of the bath, wrapped himself in a blanket, and began to cry. I would too. Death is terrible. Why do we need all this? I seem to be starting to go crazy. Sasha thought to himself, crying and crying into his pillow. Arkady remained emotionless. In any case, he found a plus in this situation. Now he could smoke in peace, smoke with impunity. First of all, leaving in the evening, he took a box of matches in a stall and went home. He tried this cigarette, Baldella, and accepted this idea for himself. I'm not sure what that means. And not bad. Now I will always smoke. It brings pleasure. How can you afford that, though, if you can't afford food? The next week, Sasha suggested that the bathtub be consecrated. Arkady hesitated, but still thought it would be a good idea. The brothers went to look for the necessary materials at a nearby construction site in order to steal building materials. They did it without squabbling with the men who worked there: brick, cement, sand, and crushed stone. They stole it and didn't get in trouble, I guess. They dragged all this to the apartment in a day. Dang. How strong are these? At first I was under the impression these were kids, but maybe they aren't. They mixed this into an old basin and began to close up the passage. Before starting, they needed to take out the door with an axe. Arkady took it, swung it, and knocked it on the noose. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but I'm assuming they got the door out. It turned out not to knock it out the first time. He struck several times, and only then the door began to recoil. The second loop was finished faster. The door fell, and they carried it to the kitchen. That is one hell of a strong door. I gotta say, that's impressive. Meanwhile, Arkady decided to mix the cement. He had to take water in the bathtub, but the bodies in the bathtub. Oh boy, this is terrible. The smell was not the most pleasant, so they tried to finish everything faster. 2 hours later, they still managed to close up the opening, but then a second problem arose. Since it was built in the post-war period, the windows overlooked the bathtub, which means that from the street, you could see the corpse. Arcady thought of nailing up the window from the outside with various boards that stood at their entrance. Now they could live with peace of mind, if not for one thing. But the bathtub is combined with the restroom. It turns out they simply did not have a toilet in the apartment. But brave Arcady, on guard at the door, he is a patriot. The toilet is fucking. I'm sorry. All right, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That threw me out. At the same time, the puppy came up and started scratching me because he wanted on my lap. I'm sorry, the toilet is killing me. I'm so sorry. Also, if you hear some weird noises in the background, the dog is playing. I really apologize. I'm hoping that the noise filter will filter it out. So yes, right in the kitchen, as if saluting the people who were sitting, everything is like in the zone. They just built themselves a toilet is what I'm getting out of this. In fact, the idea is not stupid. They had a door in the floor in the kitchen, and there in turn is something like a cellar. It was very deep. After all that had happened, their life would never be the same. They were messing around in their free time, chatting about this and that. During that time, Arcady became very addicted to smoking. There was no longer a living place in the apartment without smoke. Only now, poor Sasha still could not put his mother's death in his head. I mean, your mother died, of course not. Every now and then he grieved at night. I mean, I'd be crying every day. I'm having a hard enough time with my dog passing away. I can't even imagine it was my mom. And so, on one of the nights, he could not stand it, quietly dressed, threw a rope, soap into his pockets, and left home. He never returned. At first, Arcady worried about his brother, but quickly got used to it, calming himself with more puffs of smoke. Finally, the long-awaited morning came. The sun began to slowly make its way through a small gap between the curtains, from which an unpleasant smell, reminiscent of Peter, as old as the house itself, Peter the First, I guess, airing the apartment was not part of Arcady's plans. He was already comfortable breathing air filled with countless dust. He felt like he was in his own environment in the dust. Puppy just licked the microphone, I'm sorry. The time had already passed 10 hours. Arcady still could not get out of bed. He was a man of honest rules. His sleep ended at exactly 7, as on schedule, but only now he got up closer to dinner. After lying for another couple of minutes, sleepy Arcady still bothered to get up from his shabby and something soiled bed. The bed itself, according to the canons, was without any accessories, a duvet cover, a sheet, a pillowcase. He did not have that. What for? After a lazy climb, his health deteriorated sharply. His legs gave way. Everything in front of his eyes, began to blur. His ears boiled. Oh boy, that sounds terrible. And the Gundesh fiercely beat in his head. I'm not sure what that is. Apologies. Unable to withstand the violent pain, he, holding his head, fell to the floor. Arcady endured, made no sounds, bared his teeth, and screwed up his eyes. The pain grew stronger and stronger. Veins began to swell all over the face, which heated up with violent pain and made him suffer. He faced this problem for a long time, and since that time, Arcady cannot withstand what kind of unknown illness he caught, from which every morning he is accompanied by pain. He could not lie quietly. His body was twitching in frenzied convulsions. But just during these painful impulses, a recession occurs, after which the pain begins to gradually stop. His health has improved significantly. He got up, felt his head, spread his arms to the sides, and straightened his fingertips. So much so they began to twitch separately from the whole hand. Hot start, as always. From all this, he began to spit on the floor and grin angrily into the void. How, if not so, can he vent all his anger? He regained consciousness a little, brushed off his trousers, and went to the window. The curtains were always closed, and on the sides they were hammered in with nails, purely for safety reasons. He, like the previous day, wanted to admire the very gap between them, as if expecting to see something new for himself. Sometimes he had strange images in front of his eyes, which aroused him. Another blow, like yesterday. Nothing changes. Arcady said in a sad voice and headed for the kitchen. Kitchen, the most disgusting place in this apartment. The smell here was not the most pleasant. It was all the fault of the egg yolks he kept in a bucket. It's not clear why he put them there and didn't throw them away. Apparently he believed that this is how people breed chickens. The smell did not bother him much. First, he was not picky about smells. Secondly, his entire nasopharynx was covered in a thick layer of soot. Oh boy, ow, icky. He decided to put a scope. He had never had a new brew. A scoop. I don't know why I read scope. He decided to put a scoop. He never had a new brew, so he always used the old one, which could no longer offer any taste except for bitterness. This is with the proviso that it was Indian tea, which even in its fresh state was not the most delicious. The kettle usually took a very long time to warm up, so he decided to go to his room and lie down for a while. My head was bursting with thoughts. Wait, so are we Katie? I'm not sure. Well, I'll probably have tea, then I'll go to the store. An incredible rumble was heard from within the kitchen, as if something massive had fallen to the floor. Frightened, he fell onto his bed and completely wrapped himself in a blanket. What's happened there? He nevertheless decided to throw off the blanket and go check what happened in the kitchen. The whole room was in boiling water from which steam was emanating, and the kettle was lying in the water. He carefully lifted it up and was about to put it on the stove, but saw a hole in it from a shot? Oh no. He threw the kettle back in fright and sat down on the chair. Who's shooting at him? What if I had been in the place of the kettle? I would have died. He took a pack of Norma cigarettes from the table, took out a stinky cigarette, struck a match, lit a cigarette, and drew in the gifts of the homeless. Interesting. The whole room was immediately filled with the smell of sewers. Ah, this room. Existence gradually stopped. Its course each time slowed down more and more. The coals ran out, and each time it became more and more difficult to hammer at the stove. There was no proper fuel in stock, because it all comes to an end. The inhalation of tobacco, which gave off the husk from the seeds, brought more and more burdens. In principle, there is nothing wrong with this. Only the throat was torn from pain. He wanted more, insatiability. Wow, sorry. Dyslexia is hard today. Appeared in him. Opening the pack, he was shocked. The last one. We'll have to go for new ones. Blowing smoke through his lungs was Arcadie's favorite pastime. In this, he felt the ideal of life, the philosophy of a Russian person. Unquestioningly, he loved the vapors of tobacco smoke. Sorry, it just, the way that I'm reading this, it comes off as like, the philosophy of Russians is smoking. Maybe it is. If you're Russian, let me know. I didn't know that was a thing. Such an amount makes the majority of them sickening, but for our hero, it is akin to salted peanuts in cheese breading. Time gradually began to approach the ritual. Not having time to finish, Arcadie's hands began to shake, and the pain in his head was growing every second, so much so that he almost fell out of his chair. He threw the bowl to the floor, spat on it, and with neat steps adhering to the wall, went into the room. My head hurts. Withering like an old man, he went to the window, opened the curtains, and thrust his bald head into the sun's rays. The whole room sparkled dazzlingly. These stunning beams bounced off his head straight into the chandelier. The light bulb immediately lit up with the bright light and burst. He fell to the floor. The pain gradually eased. After lying for a couple seconds, he got up and sat down on the bed. I ought to screw in a new light bulb. He got up from the sofa, opened the wardrobe, and took a light bulb from the bottom shelf. After that, he decided to bring a stool from the kitchen and, I guess, bring it in. Having already stood on it, screwed in a new one. So wait, if he has a bald head, is it because he's old? Is it because he's sick? Or has he been shaving his hair? How long has it been? How many days have passed? Now, it was possible to fully consider our matured hero. Arcadie was a very gloomy person, so he always walked with a sour face, as befits a person who has gone through many troubles. In addition, he lived in the northern part of Russia. The pallor on his face was frightening. He could be compared with the people in the dying photo. Now he's an adult? I thought he was a child. He was playing with toys earlier. I'm very confused about the passage of time in here. His clothes, like himself, were not the first freshness. His white t-shirt had already lost its color long ago and had a bunch of brown spots and greasy streaks. It didn't lose its color, it gained color. Let's put it that way. And here is one of his favorite things in his wardrobe. Short pants. Just like the shirt, it had lost its original color. Yes, damn it, his grandfather used to wear them. What else can I say? His gaze was directed to an old cabinet that had no doors inside and a single hanger. It was an elegant gray jacket, a real pride for him. Arcady became dull and thought again, scratched his forehead and stood up. It's time to go for cigarettes. He got up and went to the closet, took his jacket, and somehow separated the hanger from it. The hanger was all sticky because he covered it in duct tape. Interesting. He carefully put on his jacket, although there was no point in this caution since it was all dirty from the inside. Time passed and the desire to smoke grew stronger and stronger. He immediately went into the hallway to put on his shoes. Arriving, he opened the old ottoman, took from there the shoes that had been popular dad company. There was a knock on the door, and immediately after, a harsh voice was heard. Hello, this is the gas tent. I was recently informed about a gas leak in your apartment. He took the keys from his pocket, inserted them into the door lock, and began to scroll. The lock constantly seized up, so he had to open the door for a long time. He opened it after all. He let the person out of the gas check without question. As he led himself to the kitchen, the same shot flashed before his eyes. He was a little wary. In the kitchen, the inspector almost choked to death. He coughed incessantly. It can be seen that he wanted to say something to him, but his cough prevented him from doing that. The gasman went to the pipe, at times turned at Arcady, and threw a cough to say something viciously to him. Arcady himself was sitting on a stool, knocking his fingers on the table. So does he maybe have gas poisoning? Is that what's going on? After a few minutes, the stranger stopped, cleared his throat, and wiped his face with a clean rag. Who made such a hole in the pipe? Man, I have no idea where it came from. And by the smell of it, it's difficult to determine that your whole apartment... Oh, yeah! Okay, hold on here. This maybe makes more sense. Okay. And by the smell of it, it's difficult to determine that your whole apartment here smelled of gas. I nearly fainted before I fixed it. I wanted to ask you to open the window, but it was fucking boarded up. I did not smell any such smell. It's good that you even opened the door. Otherwise, you would have let the whole house out into the air. Okay, I'll go. The man took something like a portable box with him and hurried out of the apartment. Arcady nervously shook his hands in front of him. He really wanted to smoke. He got up from the creaking stool, walked onto the corridor, and collapsed onto the ottoman. He was already reaching out to look for his shoes, but then he remembered he hadn't taken them off. Wait, so if the gas was that bad, how did he not, when he struck a match, blow the whole thing up? Finally, he could open the door and go out into the street. The entrance was damp. The beams holding the railings were sagging because of the water that had been absorbed into them. Cockroaches squirmed all along the walls, climbing into the cracks. This strained him a little, and therefore he quickly left the building. Leaving the building, he was met by a neighbor who began to powder his brains. Don't make me a fool. I remember you owe sugar and I borrowed. I guess we owe them to him, or Seryoja, I don't really understand you. Let's do it another time. I'll go get cigarettes and then we'll talk. Yes, you already come on quickly. Otherwise, I can't wait any longer. Come sooner. I'll pay you back, probably. He muttered something to Arcady, but he no longer heard him. He walked along the snow-covered streets. The snowdrift was incredible. The old peasant janitor barely had time to dig paths. The janitor noticed Arcady and decided to approach him. You're Arcady, aren't you? Well, it seems like it was in the morning. Oh, see, one person was looking for you here. He said that he would be near Products 24 store. What? I don't seem to have any acquaintances. Who can wait for me? I don't know, he just told me this. But should I ask him? Why did you surrender to him? Okay, just on the way to the store, I wanted to stop by. Okay, so Arcady, walking to the corner of the house, turned towards the janitor who scooped up snow and looked at him. He waved, and the janitor turned away in response and walked behind the snow-covered drifts. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's definitely a language barrier, so I apologize if not all of it's making sense. The snow fogged up the eyes and did not easily access to the coveted store. The edge of the rough toenails was crushed, and the phalanges themselves fell off in small pieces, which were felt in the socks. Wait. His foot? What? His toes just fell off? Like a cockroach crawling into a sock in the morning. Fortunately, this did not affect Arcady in any way. As long as he can move with these legs, he does not care about anything. Not stupid, who does not know otherwise, but stupid is who chirps a little winter shoe in the snow. And that says it all. Did his toes fall off? I'm so confused. A strong gust of wind made it difficult to get to the store. It blew so hard that Arcady managed to fall a couple times on the way. He was covered in snow, shaking it off his jacket and trousers, but it was useless. He was swept up anyway. The protruding tears froze, and his eyes could hardly open. Sorry about the cut. Coming very close to the store, Arcady thrust both hands under his jacket. He looked like an invalid. Under the signboard, Products 24, stood a man with a cigar in his mouth and another in his hand. He rolled towards the building when he saw Arcady. He was gray-haired and his face was covered in numerous scars. His clothes were typical of the 90s recketers, a leather jacket and elegant sport glasses. For the sake of decency, Arcady took his hands out from under his jacket and went up to the man. Although I felt distrust of him, the situation was just right for Arcady, so he could help but not approach, I guess. Hello, can I have a cigarette? By the way, you were looking for me? Well, what do we have here? He took a pack of unmarked cigarettes from his pocket and handed it to him. Arcady, beside himself with happiness, dumbfounded, tried to hug the gray-haired man, but he pushed him straight into a snowdrift. Arcady held the pack in his hands, although he fell head over heels. Why'd you push me? You wanted cigarettes, so I gave them to you. You don't need anything else from me. I can only say that we still need you. Prepare yourself mentally. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a blizzard arose. Everything was covered with snow, so that it was impossible to see anything further than a meter. Arcady tried to accelerate and enter the store as quickly as possible. The store was much warmer. He looked very gloomy, empty shelves on which almost nothing but stale bread. A discouraged grandmother stood in front of the stillages? Nothing was heard. Only the old saleswoman fell asleep in her closet to the noises from the radio. Arcady did not call her. There was no need for help, since the mysterious man had already given him cigarettes. Apparently the saleswoman heard his arrival, hesitated, getting up from the old chair, and went to the cash register, leaving the room. There was disgust and dependability on her wrinkled face. Her greasy, swollen face expressed hatred. Have you come for cigarettes, as usual for you, Norma? No, I just get warm. It's sweeping heavily outside. Ah, well, it's clear, so we won't take anything today? No, I just went to get warm. That's right, we still have almost nothing. Better leave it to the grandmothers. They need it more. It's not a good time in the country. Have you heard about it on the radio? Radiation, God forbid, overtakes us from Ural. Yeah, things are bad. What are you saying? Try to sit here for me. Work. I work for a pittance. And you are always looking for a freebie. Once you entered the store and you don't even need cigarettes. Why did you start yelling at me? It is also my fault? You yourself came here first. Arcady did not argue. He turned away and went to the exit, opened the door, and saw that it was no longer snowing on the street. It was rather calm. He immediately left, not listening to the cries of the cashier. He went out into the street. The stranger was no longer there. Only huge, dirty, crumbling panels filling its void. And here, the first problem of Arcady, he did not have a lighter or matches with him, and it was sickening to go back into the store, so he decided to be patient and walk to his house. The path was not remarkable. He didn't meet anyone, but Seryoja was already waiting for him at the entrance. Listen, you forgot sugar again anyway. Listen, can we just pay this off with a cigarette? Oh, is that something new the store started selling? Well, yes, new. Well, thanks. Give me a cigarette here. Arcady fished out one cigarette from the pack. Seryoja held out his hand as if he wanted to wash himself with warm tap water. Well, since you are satisfied, are we in the calculation? No, the debt must. I'll take the cigarette. Seryoja snatched out a cigarette and showed a middle finger with a bad face. Arcady pouted and went into the entrance without haste. He reached the door. Quickly running into the apartment, throwing off his frozen shoes and throwing them away, Arcady, with a spark in his eyes, ran to the kitchen. For graceful savoring, he decided to put a kettle on to wash down each drink with boiled water. He filled the kettle with water. Before he could put it on the stove, a knock was heard at the window. I will disfigure you. Immediately, he disappeared from sight. Arcady was shaken. Really, Seryoja wanted him to repay his debt so badly. Arcady took a knife from the locker so that if something happens to fight off the brutal Serge if he climbs into the window. Another knock on the window. Everything will be great. Arcady was nervous. Sweat was dripping from his head. His ears were smoking. His hands were shaking. It all looked very scary. Someone grabbed Seryoja by the neck and dragged him into the darkness. Outside the window, nothing was visible. The snow covered everything clean. Arcady was all worried. He sat down in the chair to move away from what he saw. He took the pack out of his pocket and threw it on the table. Spreading his legs wider and scratching his turnips, he began to think to himself. Yes, it happens in life one day, and so many things have already happened. Arcady snorted a little, looked at the ceiling, and noticed that A4 paper hanging there with a huge black dot in the middle. It is unclear where it came from, but Arcady could not take his eyes off of it. It says her, but that's the wrong pronoun. He peered at her without blinking. It was as if she had taken him into a trance. His eyes filled with blood, and then the skin had a milky color. The veins were swollen. This is just a piece of paper with a dot? I'm very confused. All this happened in an instant. Arcady immediately got better. He cheered up, not without pain, but his health improved. He pulled up a chair, climbed onto it, and tore off the sheet. He put it in his pants pocket and jumped to the floor. He put the kettle on, lit the gas, and immediately began to get a cigarette out of the pack. He lit the cigarette from the stove. The first straw was tight. He even coughed. How has his house not exploded with all the gas? He coughed heavily, but continued to suck in, I guess, since he had never smoked such strong ones. The whole body began to prick. He already saw Sergia in front of him. Now he saw himself. Oh, so he is an adult. Now he is in the bathroom, and before his eyes, the remains of his mother. Arcady shook his head and returned to the kitchen. His hands were cut. His lip was bitten to the point of blood. He sat down in the chair. A voice filled his head and told him to calm down and undress. He tore off his jacket, stomping on it and coughing up black drool. The torso was covered in festering wounds. He touched them. Sticking his dirty nails, he scratched the wound and howled in pain. Arcady fell on the floor and began to roll on it. Agony. Real agony. Not otherwise. This is how he felt. Light. This light pierced through the eyes like a thunderbolt. It was felt inside, behind the eyes, as if the whole world and body were shining. The inhuman laughter strained me so much, a painful laugh, as if someone on their deathbed drank their last gulp of water. It was Arcady. He laughed out of himself, like a real nutcase. He was bedridden. Suddenly, something growled nearby. It began to approach closer and closer to the ear, breathing over it and squelching vilely, after which it began to tear the eardrums with an unbearable roar. Arcady was amused. His eyes narrowed with pain. Tears corroded his cheeks with a stream of salt. The eyes began to bulge slowly. They swelled like overgrown cherries and burst out with such a sliding sound. The bloody ooze began to fill everything around. It seemed that our hero's cries were heard throughout the world. The screeching of the saw began to pester his ears, buzzing in time to the screams. The light began to pierce the darkness. A dark silhouette in a black robe stood in front of his face. The masked man threw his things on the table and walked out of the door. After a while, the light in the room went out. The room was gloomy and eerie. The smell gave off dampness. The TV turned on, which was located opposite the hero. Hello, Arcady. You are honored to be a part of our plan. What you see and feel now has no meaning. It will not be verbose. Fear nothing. You will still do a service to the world with your ritual. The TV turned off. The room light turned on again. Viscous blood poured from the ceiling. It filled with everything. It filled with itself everything. It has already reached the body. Hands, feet, then mouth. It was over as soon as it came to the nose. The blood began to boil, merging with the sounds of the toilet flush. A bloody silhouette crawled out of it, dressed in a latex suit. He was wearing a gas mask. He walked around the room, dodging like a madman. I broke my fingers snugly against the walls, sloshing blood in a gas mask, dripping out onto the floor. Arcady opened his eyes. He was heavily covered by a cigarette. He felt his body. It was normal. He got up, leaning on a chair, and sat down on it, dropped his head to the floor and clasped his hands, closed his eyes, and blew under his breath. He put his hand into his pocket and took out the covered sheet and tore it. He threw off the papers. On the floor, he noticed the package. Bending down, he took it. I couldn't smoke it all out. I don't even remember what happened to me. He began to feel the same when he saw that there were bones in his corridor. Arcady swallowed his saliva nervously. He rolled on the table, bowed his head, spat out blood, which was dripping slowly from his lips. He felt cold and decided to take his jacket, which was lying tattered on the floor, all in bloody saliva and crumpled. It didn't bother. The main thing was to fasten something on yourself. He went out to the corridor, stepping over the bones. Looking in, he saw the whole bathtub was thrown about with pieces of bones. In the sink was the mother's skull, which he had washed with tap water. Or was washed with tap water, excuse me. Somebody washed it. It probably wasn't him. So one thing I'm confused about. Someone tore down his mother's... the wall between the bathroom and the rest of the living quarters? I think that's what I'm understanding. He could not believe that it all happened in his apartment. His hands were trembling, his temple was throbbing rapidly, and his legs were shaking. He left the room, not wanting to look at it. He sat down on his emaciated sofa, lowered his head, and began to cry. Sorry, I'm laughing because a sofa can't be emaciated. That's a living being word. A beautiful snow-white room in which the very leaders of the underground organization were sitting. They drank tea at a small table. Mostly all were wearing masks, and only two of the main chairmen, of the organization were without them. The first was a man with glasses, and the second was a woman with short hair. I believe that enough people have figured out that the madness is going on. The masked people were not verbose. In response, they only nodded and continued to listen to the main thing. As you all know, the experiment is out of control. We don't have enough energy to reach our ultimate goal. Thanks the scouts for finding the infected. Does it make sense to continue doing this? It seems to me like it will not lead to anything good. No, we won't even consider this option. If we begin to move towards our goal, then we can never turn back. Well, you know better. So we have a choice or a chance to finish what we started. It only takes time. I already gave a sign to one. The scout worked very well in the north. We will be waiting for our package. This man has incredible strength. After these words, they all got up from the table, shook hands, and left the room. The door rattled. A police squad tried to enter. After successfully entering, they saw a terrible picture for themselves, the remains of a man lying in the corridor. One of them carefully stepped over the bones, holding a submachine gun in his hand. Seeing Arcady, who was sitting with his back to them, he shouted, "Hands up! Hey, I won't repeat it anymore. Raise your hands." Arcady obeyed, raised his hands, and tears fell from his eyes. They immediately ran up to him, threw him face down on the floor, and put handcuffs on him. He called his partner over the radio. Is his name Maxim, I'm assuming? "Sonia, let's take pictures of everything here. We've got psychotic rage here." Sonia entered the apartment, slowly walking around the rooms. He was not filming. He was looking at what happened in the apartment. Sonia looked into the bath, and he saw the skull that lay in the sink. All his youth flashed before his eyes. He tried in every possible way to forget it, but no. Here are the memories. Two guys were laying bricks in that very bathroom and making terrible sounds. Before him, he saw Arcady, his brother. They were both small. A misery tear flowed from his eyes. He wiped his face, took a couple of photos for the sake of appearance, so that there were no prisons in the area. Finally, having finished filming the materials, he went out to the street. The car was waiting for him. He climbed into it. Maxim? Now it's Maxim. Okay, began to dig up to him. "Something you take a long time. You usually cope faster." "No, nothing. It was just interesting." "Oh, okay. Hold on. Sonia is Sasha, who is Alexander. Maybe?" In a tired voice, Arcady interrupted the conversation. "I'm telling you, I didn't do it. It's my mother. My brother and I buried her there." Arcady did not recognize Sonia, even by his voice. "Buried your mother in the bathtub? How is that even possible? Sasha, what do you think?" "This is terrible." The last digit put a bold dot on Arcady's memory. He did not understand what was happening to him and how he got here. A doctor was standing over the bed, writing something down in a notebook. Arcady was not the only one who was in this place, A lot of people have experimented with. They all uttered heart-rending screams. It all looked like a terrible mental hospital. In the same room, there was a foreigner who was muttering something in his own. What is even more surprising, opposite Arcady passed out, was Sergio. His skull was cut open, and a part of his brain was visible outward, and wires were connected to it. Those wires led to a huge apparatus. It was connected to a strange generator. His face was all sweaty, but he seemed to feel nothing. Or he was already dead. But then why was he sweating? Although it may have been a pot. All this was strange for Arcady, some kind of experiment. The devil knows why. He closed his eyes to sleep and not see it all. So essentially, Sonia, Alexander, and Sasha are all the same person. I'm not sure why the names are inconsistent, but obviously it's his brother. And his brother has joined this underground thing and is now come back to get him, I guess. Small interrogation room. Arcady and Maxim are sitting at an old table talking to each other. Arcady sat motionless in handcuffs, and Maxim, munching a sandwich, interrogated him. Sonia watched from the side, shaking his hands. Or his head? So you're saying that there's something wrong with you? How did you manage to understand that there was a corpse behind the wall? Maybe you're hiding the whole point from us. I already said that she died a long time ago, not through my fault. Oh, don't pretend. I know you like that. That explained why you didn't smell, couldn't tell about the corpse either. Say your mother is dead. A normal person would not act like that. You think I'm such a dumbass, right? Everything is clear. Crime, Sonia, we have problems. Let's put him in jail on a tag so that he realizes what he did. I don't think he did anything. Okay. Well, you know, Sonia, our favorite basement. Yeah. What are you, empathizing with him? He's insane. No, I don't empathize. I'm just not in the mood. Don't sulk. We'll soon be celebrating Isla's birthday. Let's swell. Okay, I'm getting ready. You can take him to the cell now. Hold the key, and I'll go. Okay. Sonia dragged Arcady to the basement, where he hugged him near the cell. What? Sonia released him. Didn't you recognize me or what? No? Brother, you certainly surprised me. I thought you doubled over there and killed yourself after the day I left. I thought you went to hang yourself. You even took a rope with you. Well, almost. Wait, you weren't even interested? Didn't you follow me? You know, I myself had such thoughts, but I didn't dare. Therefore, I didn't follow you. Okay, you're lucky that I work with the Musama. Musama, maybe? How'd you get here? In short, it was like this. I went to the abandonment, prepared for the rope, already climbed onto the loop, and here, out of nowhere, a homeless man pushes me. He etched me his story, that life cannot end like this. I denied, told him in tears about the situation with my mother, and that my brother did not stop me. In general, I didn't see a point in living. Then he gave out that I have a chance to change everything, that no matter what difficulties, I can get up from my knees and start living again, from scratch. He used himself as an example. He says that after all, he did not commit suicide, despite the fact that he started with a dirty sheet. He has a thirst for life, not without problems, but even in this state, you can live. He told me that I can visit the site, that maybe they'll help me. That's how I ended up here. They gave me shelter, taught me everything that is possible, allocated a dorm room. While Sonia was talking, he had already managed to get Arcady out of the handcuffs. So there is an emergency exit here. That door leads to the backyard. Usually there is no one there. Get across the yard and run as fast as you can. Wait, and you won't be punished if you let me go like this? Don't worry about me. I'll get out somehow. They hugged each other goodbye. Arcady patted Sonia on the back and said, I'll never forget your help, and forgive me for the past. It was so long ago. Don't worry. Okay, now I'll open the door and you will go.